Hello, welcome to the Wildline podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the box office. Today is going to be the weekend review for March 8th through the 10th. It's a special weekend. It's the Captain Marvel weekend. This is a movie I've been looking forward to covering for quite some time here. It's been a quiet 2019, and so this is when the fireworks really start for the year. And boy, did they. So we will walk through the top 10 for the weekend at the box office, focusing mostly on Captain Marvel, and then talk a little bit about maybe some stuff outside of the top 10, maybe some awards holdovers, and then talk about what's going to happen over the next few weeks at the box office. So let's do this. Coming in at number 1 this weekend, Captain Marvel with $153 million. Wow. Just wow. Tracking on this was looking at like 100, 120 a couple weeks ago. And it was just one of those moments. It reminded me a little bit of Black Panther, where tracking just kept going up, not even week after week. It felt like tracking was going up day after day, leading up to this opening weekend. And so by the time we got to, Thursday, as this movie opened, I was expecting, I think my official guess was 163. So I was a little bit maybe overzealous in my prediction. But 153 is just an amazing performance for this movie. Again, just some context to it. Like, this is a standalone character. It's their first Captain Marvel first movie. It's not like a continuation of another series here. It's a brand new sort of origin story. The first MCU female-led film as well. Trying to sort of match the Wonder Woman opening, which it actually blew it out of the water. Wonder Woman, when that opened, it had great legs, but it opened way below this. Like, I can't remember the top of my head. It was like 104-ish, 110-ish, 112 maybe. I'll check. But Captain Marvel is not necessarily what you would call a top shelf, top tier character in the Marvel, I think, comic universe. So it's a really special opening. Is it surprising though? Not really. I think MCU has built up such a specific brand, and the way that they, create their movies, produce their movies, finish off their movies, market their movies, is really, it's finely tuned. And they are essentially a factory for these like huge blockbusters, right? And so it's not that surprising that it's opening this big. But if you even looked back like, I don't know, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I don't think you would have expected this. Doctor Strange opened only about 2.5 years ago, not even. And that opened up at $85 million, brand new character in the MCU universe. And now, ever since, Black Panther came out last year, the whole thought process around the non-Avengers MCU films has really changed. And so Captain Marvel is just the biggest of wins. So let's go over the basic numbers here. In terms of how the movie was received, and there's a whole like mountain of controversy to talk about this. It's not real controversy. It's just like made up BS that people who are on the right wing in this country, and I guess the world too, are trying to attack the movie because Brie Larson is to the left of like Rush Limbaugh, so apparently she's a monster. She's also a woman, so that makes her terrible. I mean, that's the thought process of these people. It's just mind-blowingly stupid. But there was a lot going on with that. I'm not going to dive too much into that, but it does come up here in sort of when we look at the Rotten Tomatoes scores. So the critics gave it a 79% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is good. Pretty great overall. Not like insanely good. It's not in the mid 80s or 90s. Overall score, and this is an actual score from critics, 6.9 out of 10. So a little bit lower there. It's anecdotally talking to people, it kind of seems like a typical MCU film, if that makes sense. You kind of get what you expect out of it, and it's not really super, super amazing, but it's definitely not bad either. So kind of like right in the middle there. Financially, though, it's a home run, grand slam even. Audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is where the controversy starts coming in. Rotten Tomatoes has been all over the place in the last the last week, trying to sort of do something with their must-see score. That's the score where you say, hey, I want to see this. and they usually give you a percentage on the movies page, like, 80% of people want to see this or something like that. Well, that got hacked, or something happened with the whole troll movement against alt-right movement against this movie. And so they edited that or took that down this week. And now the audience score is essentially being hacked. And they've, Rotten Tomatoes is like falling over themselves trying to explain this. And, because when you look at the financial performance of this movie and you look at the cinema score, which was an A, which is very high, of course, the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is 55%. It was 35% out of 100 earlier when it opened. So obviously Rotten Tomatoes is being sort of manipulated, and their audience score has been hacked multiple times. This has come up before. This is one of the reasons why ever I talk about Rotten Tomato audience score, I say, hey, it's easily hackable. Take it with a grain of salt. Cinema score, despite all its, sort of biases and issues with the way that it does its survey, it is a scientific survey in person. So it's going to be more accurate as to what those people actually thought about the movie. And so cinema score of A, letterbox score of 3.6, which is the same as what Wonder Woman got. So the nerds are really into it. It's a little bit lower than Black Panther, which is a 3.8, and Thor Ragnarok, which is a 3.8. But those might also be like people who saw it on streaming and stuff, a little bit different of a score. Ant-Man and the Wasp was a 3.3. So definitely on the higher end there in terms of the letterbox community. Definite recommend score. I think this is post-track. 68% of the people who saw it would definitely recommend it to their friend to go see. 58% of the audience saying it met their expectations, with 35% saying it exceeded. So that's kind of what I was talking about above with those sort of critic scores and the anecdotal stuff. It seems like it's a really good movie and people really enjoyed it, but it's not like some artistic masterpiece, and it's not going to change comic book movies for eternity. Something like Dark Knight did, where it was just like felt almost like a Godfather level masterpiece of a film. So it's not necessarily that, but it is it's a super enjoyable film. People really like it, and people showed up to go see it. So 153 is the official estimate for the weekend. The vibe that I'm getting from the Deadline article and just from people talking, it seems like it's probably going to be, when the actuals come in tomorrow afternoon, you're probably looking at like 155-ish, maybe 157 possibly. I think Disney is sort of lowballing this Sunday a bit, not to get ahead of themselves, but I think it will end up making more money today than they're estimating. But the 153 is the official estimate. In terms of, I talked about tracking before on this. The expectation, I think, here coming into, let's say, 2019 was that it's going to do well. We all know it's going to do well. There were some sort of misgivings about maybe the quality of the film. The trailers weren't fantastic. I didn't really like the trailers at all, to be honest with you. I thought they were very bland. So there was some sort of anxiety and hesitation about saying, hey, this is going to make 150. Like, maybe it makes 100. I mean, let's look back to last year. Ant-Man and the Wasp opened to $75 million. Of course, that was 3 months after Avengers Infinity War opened up to $257 million, the biggest wide release opening weekend ever. And then we had Black Panther before that at 202 in 2018. So I think it was very hard to judge where this was going to fall. Is this going to be closer to like a Black Panther, or is this going to be closer to like Ant-Man and the Wasp, or closer to like a Doctor Strange opening, which is sub 100? I thought it was entirely possible starting in 2019 that this thing wouldn't sort of break the 120. I thought it was maybe like 100 to 120. But as time went on, and the other context here is that 2019 has not been a great year at the box office at all. It's been off pretty significantly. It's been quiet. I think people were clamoring for a bigger movie, and I think Captain Marvel really fit that role for people. They really wanted something, explosive and exciting, an adventure movie, and that's what they got. So the debut here is the third best debut in March. It's behind Disney's Beauty and the Beast, which did 174, and behind Batman vs. Superman, which did 166. I think in terms of, where it sits in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I talked about there, it's better than your Doctor Strange, your Ant-Man and the Wasp, which didn't break 100. If you're going back the last couple of years, obviously it's not in the Avengers Black Panther realm. It's just that it's not there. Uh, it's better than Thor Ragnarok, which opened at 122 back in November 2017. It's way better than Spider-Man Homecoming, which opened up at 117 back in 2017. That, I think, when thinking about the context of this opening, and it's so hard now at MCU to wrap your head around it, just because, as of maybe since 2015, whenever Ultron came out, I think that was it, things have just changed so much in for the box office and for comic book movies in general. When something like Guardians of the Galaxy 2 came out, that was what, I think May of 2017. The assumption there is that, like, oh yeah, like that's gonna break like 100 easy. Probably the original did in the 90s, which was a big surprise. The expectation was like, oh yeah, it's easily gonna break 100, and maybe it goes up to 150. Ended up making 146, which I think was a really good performance there. But that was the sequel to a really successful, really kind of memey movie. And so with Captain Marvel, there were a lot of question marks. One, okay, first, it is the first female-driven MCU movie. Was that really going to matter, especially after Wonder Woman did so well a couple of years ago? Probably not, but it was a question mark, I guess. To me, the biggest sort of unknown was the character. And this has come up before in the comic book movie universe, or with movies and sort of from DC and Warner Brothers and Fox. Sometimes they put up a character that's like not super well known. But time and time again, I've been disproven by that's like really that big of a hurdle. As long as you make a good, interesting movie that makes that character look huge and interesting, like, it's going to do well. I mean, Deadpool, that was a huge question mark. Like, who knew Deadpool all that well outside of like the X-Men sort of comic nerds? I mean, really though, like the average movie goer, they're not gonna Deadpool who? But the marketing and the way that Fox and Ryan Reynolds and everybody involved sort of painted a portrait of that character and sort of made them exciting, made them engaging, and hyped them up, and that's what got people going. Captain Marvel is interesting because it didn't really have that type of marketing campaign to sort of educate people on who the character was. It was very much a traditional MCU marketing campaign. Same types of trailers, same types of sort of social media. Brie Larson and Samuel Jackson were all over the place the last few weeks doing the circuit, but it didn't really have that hooky element to the marketing, which is one of the reasons why I was sort of like, well, at first I was like, well, that makes me kind of suspect that if it's going to break the 120-ish sort of range, or 100 to 120. But what ended up happening is that it's just like the built-in MCU hype is just there now. And that built-in hype for whatever character and whatever movie's coming out really does propel these things forward. Black Panther is a great example of a movie where certainly that was a very specific moment in our time. It was like an important film. And a lot of the Black Panther, the character, like, I didn't think he was that huge. I think a lot of that, the amazing performance of that. Remember, it opened at 202, closed out at 700 domestic. It beat Avengers Infinity War. Beat it. A lot of that, and like the Thor Ragnarok and Spider-Man Homecoming, which was technically Sony, and Doctor Strange, and even Ant-Man and the Wasp, a lot of that audience is a built-in MCU audience. They go to show up to these movies no matter what, and those people get other people who may not be MCU diehard fans to go. And it's just become this sort of cultural movement in the country now. If it's an MCU movie, it's going to open to, even if it's like Ant-Man and the Wasp opened to $75 million. Is that movie good? It's not good. Like, I saw it. It's not a good movie. It's not even fun. And I hated the first one too. There's just a built-in group of people that will automatically see this stuff no matter what it is. If it's got MCU on it and it's got that polish to it, they're going to show up. And it's going to be super fascinating to see how this plays out after the new Avengers movie. Endgame comes out in like a month and a half. And then you got Spider-Man I forgot there's another Spider-Man coming. Is that really another Spider-Man movie? Didn't we just have Homecoming? When did Homecoming come out? 2017. God, I thought it came out last year. So another Spider-Man movie, technically Sony. And then we have a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 Marvel movies that are untitled coming out over the next 3 or 4 years. So it'll be interesting to see where MCU and Disney takes this sort of army of people, this cultural movement that has happened over the last decade and some. It's not just about comic book movies, it's really about Marvel and that MCU world that they've created, where they can take a character like Captain Marvel, who isn't huge, sort of prop that character up, make a film about them, market it in the right way, present it in the right way, and get, an opening weekend of $153 million in March. I mean, it's just what they've accomplished is just, it's completely unprecedented in I think recent time in the movie studio Hollywood industry. Completely brand new universe that we're in right now with this. And I'm so fascinated to see where they take it after this new Avengers movie. Like, is it going to stay like this? Are they going to just start picking random characters from comic books and opening them to over $100 million easily? That's kind of like, it feels like we're at that stage now. Or is it going to break? Is this bubble going to pop eventually? I've been saying that for probably 10 years. Oh, the comic book movie bubble is going to burst eventually. I think that it essentially at some point it'll have to. I just don't know if it's going to be in my lifetime. I mean, there's something about it. And the argument that I've heard a few times about this is that comic book movies are not a fad. They're like this new genre like Westerns were 40 years ago. And I did not buy into that at all when people are making that argument. This is like 10, 15 years ago. But the more I see these performances, and the more we have Black Panthers, the third Thor movie, the Avengers movie, and now something like Captain Marvel, with these performances where they're making easily $300 million domestically, sometimes easily $1 billion worldwide, it does kind of feel like the comic book movie genre is just this huge given. It's just always going to be here. It's never really going to fade whatsoever. And a performance like Captain Marvel is just perfect proof of something like that. The film's good. It's not a masterpiece, but it's opening $153 million in a March. Like, that is so outrageous and so abnormal to how the box office works. It almost beat Batman versus Superman. I mean, that's like insane. So I don't know. It's just like a really cool thing to see. And where it goes, I just have no clue anymore. I've tried to make predictions about this stuff, and I just don't know. I do think at some point, well, I do know this. The Marvel Cinematic Universe will change dramatically come May 2019. The moment people see Endgame, Avengers Endgame, this whole thing is going to change. It has to, right? Because so many people from the actors and actresses are leaving. And so they're going to have to sort of replace it with new characters. If you think about what's going to happen here, I believe Captain America was supposed to be sort of the foundation of, whatever this is, phase 4 of MCU. I'm not even sure what phase we're in. The sort of, the new phase of MCU was supposed to be centered around Captain America. I think, this is what I heard. But Black Panther did so well that I think they've shifted it towards Black Panther as being the foundation for the next phase. And now you can work in Captain Marvel. You can still work in Thor. I mean, Captain America, though, is especially over. He's done, isn't he? Iron Man's essentially over. Robert Downey Jr. is done. He's not going to do it anymore. So it's like the sort of pillars of the cinematic universe are sort of gone after Avengers Endgame. So it will be, it'll be something different no matter what it is. It'll have to be something different. And I'm sure that they'll find a way to continue to make millions upon millions of dollars. But are we going to have this happen again? Are we going to have a character like Captain Marvel, which is a seemingly unknown character in the universe, open to $153 million in a March? Is that going to happen again? I don't know. I'm not sure. Is this like the peak of it? Is Avengers Endgame the peak of the entire cinematic universe? It could be. You don't know. In any event, Captain Marvel is a huge win for everybody involved. In terms of who went out to go see this, it was male heavy. 61% male, 39% female. That was through, I think, Saturday from Post Track, so that might have changed with the Saturday audiences and today audiences. It might be a little bit more female heavy. But over indexed on the male audience, 55% was over 25, 45% was under 25. That's a bigger proportion of under 25 than normal. In terms of ethnic, racial breakdown, 47% white, 21% Latino, 16% Latin American, 12% Asian, a little bit of an over index on African American and Asian audiences. Nothing too surprising there. I think the male heavy part with International Women's Day on Friday, I thought that would be maybe a little bit more even. But it's a comic book movie, right? It's not, it's not like The Notebook, so it's probably going to be a little bit more skewed towards the male audience. Okay, I think that's all I have to say about Captain Marvel. It's just like it's an awesome performance, surprising but also not surprising at the same time. Just to speak very briefly about like the movement against the film, it didn't work. Like there's this weird thing called the Alita Challenge where people are like, go see Alita instead of Captain Marvel because why? I just don't. What? And also, isn't Alita like have a really progressive message to it as well? Like these people are just wackadoos. It didn't work, and Alita did terrible this weekend, so I don't know what the hell they were thinking. In any event, Captain Marvel is just an awesome performance. And, in terms of where it's going to go here, it's at 153, probably 155 when actuals come in. You're looking at and I asked this on my Twitter, what people thought the multiplier was going to be. I mean, if you're looking at a 3x multiplier, which is possible with an A cinema score, you're looking at $459 million domestically, which nobody in a million years thought this would do. I feel like it's probably going to be like a 2.75-ish multiplier would be my guess. And that would put it at about 420. If this thing breaks 400, it would just be like a fucking miracle. I mean, that's just such a great performance overall. So nothing but great things to say about it. There's nothing negative here to talk about Captain Marvel at all. A very surprising performance overall in terms of the amount of success that it's had. Everybody thought it was going to be successful. But this has definitely gone way beyond all our sort of imaginations on how well it's doing. So that's Captain Marvel. That was number 1. Let's walk through the rest of the top 10. Coming in at number 2 this weekend was How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World. It's its third weekend, 14.6 million. Well, let's be honest, 14.7 million. 51% drop, which is pretty high for a children's film. Still in 4,000 theaters. Per theater average was $3,600. Right now, it's sitting just shy of $120 million. Really great performance for this one so far from Universal. $129 million production budget, which is kind of high for a film like this. But it really did take advantage of a really sweet opening spot here. I guess it was late February when this thing opened, but it's really wide open for it until Captain Marvel sort of broadsided it here in March. So that was number 2. Number 3 was Tyler Perry's Madea Family Funeral. We talked about this one last weekend. $12 million. I was wrong. Didn't I call like a 60% drop on this or something crazy? 55% drop, which is pretty good for a film like this. It really is. Per theater average is almost $5,000 still. That's a pretty strong second weekend for a Madea Family Funeral. It really is. $45.8 million so far for that movie. If that thing can break 60, maybe 65, that's a really big win for Tyler Perry. Number 4 is the Lego Movie 2, still sticking around. 3.8 million, 42% drop. In its fifth weekend, it is just shy of, just over $97 million. Not a great performance. This is technically now a flop. Warner Brothers has to reboot the whole Lego Movie universe. I think they will. I think there's tons of potential still with that movie universe and cinematic universe, but Lego Movie 2 just did not land well at all. Number 5 was Alita Battle Angel. We talked a little bit about this one. The Alita Challenge, so freaking stupid. 3.2 million to 56% drop. Starting to lose a lot of theaters, 700 theaters. Per theater average was 1,300. Total take so far for Alita Battle Angel is 78 million. This one's more, I think, focused on overseas right now to sort of pick up some cash. There's just been such a weird vibe about this movie. When it was coming out, and I'm drinking out of an Alita Battle Angel glass that I got at Marcus, by the way. There was a weird vibe. It's like nobody really knew kind of what it was all about. Obviously, James Cameron and Robert Rodriguez are involved, huge names, right? But kind of a new supposed to be a trilogy of films for Alita. I guess it was a big graphic novel in Japan, but it kind of unknown in the United States. And as we got to the turn of this year, or leading in 2019, there wasn't a lot of information about it. There was a trailer, you're like, oh, that looks interesting. It's kind of like a different take on. It just seemed maybe a little bit close to Avatar-ish, especially with the computer effects. But as we got closer and like it didn't really pop off at all. But then there was like opening weekend, there was this weird group of people online and this weird sort of hype, and honestly, and this is like an open secret in the industry, it's shills, right? There's a lot of shills for this movie, which is sort of translated to online PR firms who are working for Fox to sort of dictate the online discussion of this film. And you can pick them out right away, whether you're on Twitter or whether you're on the Reddit movie sub forum or the box office forum. The way people were talking about this film made no sense to how it was actually doing. And those, and like that's like a weird, people think that's like a conspiracy theory or something. No, like that's how marketing works nowadays. Like that's a given. If you are interacting with somebody about a movie online, there is a good chance, I would say probably 25% chance that person is being paid to talk about that movie in a certain way. It's PR stuff. And you can, for certain movies, especially when they don't do well and they're trying to sort of mitigate their losses, they come out in full force, and they did for Alita. And I have to think that like maybe those people are also behind the Alita Challenge. So, because it doesn't make any, even from a political sense, the Alita Challenge makes zero fucking sense. Like 0 cents. Even if you're like a right-wing Nazi, it doesn't make any sense what you're doing. Like that doesn't make, it's just nonsensical. And so with Alita, its performance is not good. In fact, it's fucking terrible. Its production budget was 170. It was really 200. They got 170 on tax breaks. It's made $382 million worldwide. I would say it's at least $150 million loss for Fox. There's not going to be a sequel. This thing is done. James Cameron and Robert Rodriguez probably called out every favor in the book to get this movie made, and they just lost Fox $100 million. And so there's no way to spin this movie as doing well. And like, no matter how many paid trolls that are out there trying to do that, it's not going to happen. It's a huge flop. And honestly, I was like, well, maybe it's not a John Carter flop. After this lead challenge, you know what? It is a John Carter flop. This movie is doing terrible. It's going to lose hundreds of millions, at least $100 million in loss. So to me, it's just an epic failure across the board for this film. Moving on. I don't want to talk about that movie ever again. Number 6, Green Book, obviously doing well. I did not realize how great this movie was doing overseas. There was a great little article, I want to say in the Washington Post or New York Times, about how Green Book is like this huge hit in China. China partly financial, I think, what's the guy's name at Alibaba? Jack Ma. He helped finance the film, and they've sort of taken upon them in China to sort of promote the film as like a product of the Chinese film industry. And so now it's a huge hit in China. It's crazy. It has done $242 million worldwide. How is that even remotely possible? It's done $80 million here domestically. And I've been talking about this film for like at least 4 months now, right? And I probably like ping-ponged back and forth about it. Like, oh, it's doing well. Oh, it's not. But it's not good enough. Its per theater average isn't good enough. This just goes to show you that like there's always a unique path to success at the box office and for art like this. And I'm not saying it's a good film. I haven't seen it. I've heard tons of criticism about it, but its financial performance is freaking amazing to see. It was shot for $23 million, obviously a big P&A budget on this one. But the fact that it's made $240 million worldwide, let's say it stopped making money right now. If it's at $250 million worldwide, you're looking at like revenues of probably about 200 and let's just say, be really conservative, it's going to make revenue of $200 million for the studio when all is said and done on a $23 million production budget and maybe like a $40-50 million marketing campaign. They're going to make so much cash. This is definitely going to be in the top 10 most profitable films of next year when Deadline comes out with that. Actually, they should be starting that pretty soon. Just a fantastic performance overall, and very surprising. And I think a truly abnormal and unique performance as well. It's not one we see very often, where a movie comes out, 4 or 5 months ago, and just sticks around. What's interesting about that is, like, A Star Is Born didn't stick around like this one did. That was the one I was calling out. It came in October. I was like, this one's not going away. It's perfect. It's a musical. It finally did beat Venom this week, by the way, and I think it also beat Solo. But it didn't stick around like Green Book stuck around. I think a lot of that's because it didn't win all those awards at the Academy Awards. Couldn't stick around long enough. If A Star Is Born had come out in November or December, I think it might have won Best Picture. Just saying. So that was number 6, Green Book. Number 7, Isn't It Romantic? Still sticking around. $44 million so far in its 4th weekend. $2.4 million this weekend. That's a pretty good, decent performance for that romantic comedy. Fighting with My Family. I thought this was going to break out. It's not going to break out. Sitting at $18.6 million so far. I was so confident it was going to break out. This felt like all the right mixture of things. It's starting to lose theaters. It's below $1,000 per theater. So that is going nowhere, unfortunately. Greta, which I talked a little bit about last week, just a disaster of a film. 2.1 million. It's been 8.2 so far. Well, you know what? I say it's a disaster, but it did Focus Features, which is what, Universal, I think. They paid $4 million for this. I can't remember, a TIFF or something like that. They made that back. So they made back their production budget on it. So that's pretty good. But in terms of just overall performance, trash. Number 10, Apollo 11, a documentary from Neon. I love Neon. Started by one of the guys who did Alma Drafthouse. I think he was one of the founders of that. But he's got a distribution company. It's Neon. I think they put out Beach Rats. They put out Ingrid Goes West, which was so good. Gemini, which I really liked. Great noir film. But they're doing cool stuff. So they put together this documentary. Apparently it's phenomenal. Dropped 19% at $1.3 million. Its first sort of top 10 appearance. Added 285 theaters this weekend. Per theater averages $3,200 per theater. Okay, so that was a really quick rundown. A lot of big focus on Captain Marvel, which I love to do a deep dive like that because it's a fun movie to dive into. What else anything else coming out? I mean, anything else sticking around? Happy Death Day to You. God, it's not even going to make $30 million. Like, what the freak happened with that movie? I still don't get it. I still can't wrap my head around. I guess it was just like people didn't want to see a carbon copy. People confuse me so much because you think like they'll see like the biggest trashy movie ever, and they like Happy Death Day to You did great the first one. I felt like really good timing around Valentine's Day to put out the second one, and it just landed with like a splat, nothing. Oh, what else is out there? Cold Pursuit is still out. 31. Cold Pursuit did more money than Happy Death Day is going to do. That's absurd to me. Bohemian Rhapsody's still out there. 215 million. Ralph Breaks the Internet still out there. 200 million. The Favorite's going to end up around $34 million overall. Mary Poppins Return is still playing. I did say Mary Poppins was going to play through the Oscars. That did has done $171 million so far. Just terrible performance. I think it's mostly it. I mean, nothing really too much on the upside. Still out. Broke $100 million. That's doing pretty well. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse at $188 million so far. The longest runner right now in the top 20 is A Star Is Born. That it sits at $214 million. And I think that's probably might actually beat Bohemian Rhapsody as well. Beating Solo, beating Venom, which I called like 2 months ago that eventually Star Is Born would leg out over Venom, and it did. Okay, so that is sort of what's going on this weekend. Let's talk a little bit about the next couple of weekends. Captain Marvel obviously is going to dominate here for the next weekend. There's nothing really coming out. There's this movie Captive State coming out. Rupert Wyatt is the director. John Goodman's in it. Vera Farmiga is also in it. He's the guy that did The Gambler, Rise of Planet of the Apes, The Escapist. It's Focus Features. I saw a trailer for it, I think last night, And I was like, what the freak is this? It's an alien invasion movie, which whatever. From a marketing perspective, and like, just I don't understand how this movie came to be and why they're releasing it in the way that they are. They're essentially dumping it the weekend after Captain Marvel with little to no marketing campaign. This is the first I've ever seen anything about it. And I obviously do this podcast every week, so like I'm always looking forward to see what's happening. I haven't heard anything about this thing. So my guess on that one is, I don't know, 15 million bucks, maybe like, no, probably like 11 to 12 million, I would say. It's, you know, I take that back. It's only opening on 2,200 theaters. So I don't know, maybe 10 million bucks. Well, that's only like what, a $2,000 per theater average. Maybe like 10 to 12 million, I would say on that one. 5 Feet Apart is also opening next weekend. CBS film, so it's going to be terrible. It's not going to do well. PG-13 though, so maybe that helps. Wonder Park is an animation film. This one is from Paramount. I've seen a little bit about this. Matthew Broderick, Jennifer Gardner, Jeffrey Tambor, doing voices. I don't know. I don't think it's going to do very well either. So I think Captain Marvel has a pretty wide open second weekend here. None of those films are going to do all that well. Then on the 22nd, I'll talk a little bit about this. Us is coming out. This is the Jordan Peele horror film. Now, all we had seen up until this weekend was the pretty cool trailers. And like Jordan Peele's coming off Get Out, which is I think one of the most fascinating performances at the box office of the last decade. He won an Oscar for that script. So I think people are really excited, even before the South by Southwest showings this weekend. I also think there's a showing for the press in New York as well. The hype on this after people saw it is now insane levels. So I think going into these showings, I was saying like, I'd like probably $40-50 million, somewhere around there opening weekend. After what I've heard on Twitter from people who've seen it and like the whole hypeness around it, I would say basement's probably 60 here. I think it's probably going to end up in the Halloween 76, $80 million opening weekend, which is insane because they probably shot this thing for like 10 million bucks. Jordan Peele's now going to be like a super big horror director. Like it's fate. It's written in the stars. Like if this one pops off like I think it's going to, he has a horror brand, and obviously he's going to expand that with the Twilight Zone series on CBS All Access, or the hell their streaming service is called. But yeah, that's going to be massive on the 22nd. And then we're going to close out March with Dumbo, which I was not too keen on, but like I feel a little tinge in my stomach of hype that's coming on this one. I can just feel it a little bit. Tim Burton, Colin Farrell, Danny DeVito, Ava Green, who's wonderful, Michael Keaton. I feel like that's actually going to perform pretty darn well. And then we get into April, we got Pet Sematary, Shazam, which I couldn't get a read on. Put a gun to my head, I couldn't even guess what it's going to do. Best of Enemies from STX. Maybe STX will have another hit on them. I don't think so. That one looks a little bit rough. Okay, so that's the box office, folks. Thanks for listening. I will be back next weekend with a sort of deeper dive in the Captain Marvel second weekend, and maybe I'll give you a official guess on what I think Us is going to do. All right, thanks for listening, guys. This has been the Wildline Podcast.